Welcome, everybody. Oh, I'm cutting off my Lord of the Rings hat. That's no good. Welcome to another live stream on John Webster Film. I'm your host, John. God, I always feel so strange saying that. I should just call it Cinematic Realms, because I'm saying, yes, John Webster Film, and I'm John Webster. But welcome, everybody. I'm joined, as always, by my trusty co-host. What's your name?
Jared Kozel, not Jared Kozel Film, though if you, John, ever want to legally change your name to John Webster Film just to make things easier, we'll support that choice.
I have been part of Force Center live streams where they put up, one of my comments, and it'll be like, and John Webster Film says, so I feel like that's my name. But this week we are joined by our wonderful dear friend, Erin, who, as you can kind of take it for granted when we chat, like in the Slack and, on social media and stuff. But I realized when I saw that wonderful face of yours that we actually haven't seen each other for a while. And it's just so great to have you on here. Thank you for doing this, Erin.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this movie, which I've said on Twitter is very near and dear to my heart, and which was just the most fun rewatch I've done in a while last night. So, yeah.
But why didn't we do this early last year, Erin? Do you remember why?
Well, someone might have been in New Zealand for the month of January last year. So
no. That was not why we didn't do this stream. We were all set to do it. Do you remember?
I don't think so. No.
Because then suddenly somebody saw Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Right. And I was like, wait, I've got Erin scheduled to come on. We can't pass up this opportunity because I loved it. And it was my very first and really only MCU stream on the channel. Unless I'm trying to remember if I actually did Spider-Man No Way Home on this channel or if it was
I think that was on Here Be Dragons.
Okay. I think that was my loophole for that one.
Yeah.
And but no, I absolutely loved Guardians Volume 3, which still ended up being, I think, like, I hate ranking stuff, but probably my second favorite movie last year. I'm very happy about that. But no, we had a blast talking about that. But the side effect of that was that it derailed talking about this movie, and then I was sort of off and on doing these for a while until I had my savior come in and help me manage this channel. A couple weeks ago, he was like, John, can we start planning things ahead? And so I feel like you're straightening me out, Jared.
No, I just like to have at least a little bit of a what's ahead on the horizon, both to hold ourselves accountable, but also just because life is going to eventually get busy, and I want to make sure that we can talk about these things because this is fun, man.
Yeah, no, I'm teasing you because in truth, AR did the same thing, where I loved talking about stuff. I loved actually doing the streams, but as far as getting myself situated and saying this is what's ahead for the next couple of weeks, I'm terrible at that. I do want to take a minute to say hi to everybody in the chat. I said AK because I have AK on the brain. She's in the chat. Welcome, AK. And so we've got Danny McKay. And Mother Roy, thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Today we are talking about the Mask of Zorro, which you said, Erin, you realized how much fun you were having watching this, and same reaction for me. I watched it today because I always like to have it super fresh in my mind, right before I stream. And just, I miss movies like this. I'm going to feel like I'm going to sound like an old fuddy-duddy, but but remembering that back in the day, this was a summer blockbuster, just makes me incredibly nostalgic for, for my youth, and which is so funny because to, to consider that 1998 was like the days of old and, the days of my youth, it feels really weird to say that.
Fine. We're fine. I'm just going to be over here as a pile of ash. No worries. Yeah.
But no, it was so much fun. But let's just go ahead and start with you, Erin, because I actually did not know this, but you mentioned over on social media that you grew up watching the old Zorro TV show. Yes. So why don't you start us off just talking about your history with, with the character and when you saw this movie for the first time.
Definitely, yeah. So that was the old black and white Zorro, which again I watched on reruns. I would like to point out that I'm not in fact old enough to have watched it when it first aired, but yeah, it's we had one of those super old TVs that had 13 channels or whatever, we were probably the last people on earth to get cable or anything like that. And so we sort of watched what was on TV a lot. But two of the things that always really stand out in my mind of stuff we watched as a family were the old Batman, the Adam West Batman, and then the old Zorro, the black and white Zorro. And just to this day, my brother still goes up to my mom and draws a Z on her, and he'd be like, "Ha, Z, gotcha in a Z," and stuff. So it's a huge nostalgia thing for my family. It just it was so fun, it had that old sort of Hogan's Heroes-esque thing to it, where they talked about serious things, but then there was the fat, sweaty lieutenant who secretly liked Zorro, and always, it was such a fun show for us all to watch. And I was obviously I was totally a horse girl when I was younger, so I was very jealous of Tornado. Really wanted to. That was probably my nascent ooh, black horse. I want a black horse, So, but yeah, it's so that's always been really, really, really special to me, that the old black and white Zorros. And so obviously when this came out, this was a must see for me, the old Zorro. It was also, I look at this now and I'm like, this is one of those movies like The Mummy that was the movie that made 10,000 people realize they were bisexual, immediately, just because
that is not what I thought you were going to say, but in retrospect, I should have expected that, because you're right.
Totally, just where both of the leads are just so absolutely smoking hot that there's no I'm a pretty straight woman, and I'm still nah, no, I would Catherine Zeta-Jones in this movie.
What are you talking about?
Right. I mean, you look at this, holy shit. Just so yeah, everybody is just absolutely ridiculously good. I mean, even Anthony Hopkins is still really good looking in this movie, but the leads are really where it's at. Absolutely here. So you just go into this and you're like, wow, it's a little too much. It's too much, So yeah. But
yeah, I'm gonna for the most part, I'll try to restrain myself during the stream, but we'll allow a time for because I went through some things as a young boy watching this for the first time and every subsequent time. But yes, you're right.
And, I know Catherine Zeta-Jones was in other things before this, but I think this was kind of her breakout role, right?
Oh yeah,
she really kind of launched her, and you can see why. She's just absolutely incandescent in this movie, and it's just, oh my god. So yeah, so that was Antonio Banderas was also certainly a big reason why I wanted to go see this movie when I was younger, So but yeah, I do remember really, really liking it in the theater. It obviously is it's clearly it's not the 1950s black and white TV show, but it kept some of the same spirit with the humor and stuff like that. Again, with a very serious, the serious things happen, but also there's a lot of fun and jokes and different things like that, So like I said, we just had a really, really fun time rewatching this, and I was so glad that we finally got around to this stream so I could do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right, because this movie, it just feels like even more so than it's one thing for me to wax poetic about, oh, you know, when I was a kid in the 90s, but it actually feels like a throwback to an even like older style of movies. And it's weird watching a movie that has I think there is a small amount of digital visual effects in terms of, like, there's the explosion at the end, and some stuff throughout that I saw in the credits. They actually do credit some, like, digital visual effects artists, but by and large this movie is such a, like, back to the days of practical, effects, film everything on set, and there's just a purity to that, watching it was like, oh man, I miss this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, God, it's just so magnificent. Jared, what about you? Did you get to see this in theaters?
I did not, because this came out in 1998. I was 9 years old at the time. I was a little too young. It was
Okay.
it was probably judged a little bit risque for my age. But I would say that I discovered it a few years later, probably around 2003, 2004 on cable. Which is actually how I found a lot of these 90s movies, The Mummy included, because, they would just put them on like TNT or whatever, and they would just run them, and you would stumble across them, and if you didn't have anything else to do, because, internet wasn't really as much of a big deal back then you just watched it, commercials and all. And this one I stumbled upon it, I would have been then, 13 or 14 at the time, and it was the middle of the movie, and I happened to arrive right around the time of the scene. Which scene, you may ask? Well, the sword fight. If you know, you know. There are multiple sword fights in this movie, but then there's the sword fight. And if you, the one that features Catherine Zeta-Jones,
Yeah.
proving that she can handle a blade, as they would say. And that, that obviously drew my attention. So I watched the rest of the movie. And then the next time it was on cable, I made sure I watched it right from the start. But at that time, I knew nothing about Zorro as a character. I just thought it was like, oh, this is a fun action movie. And once I started to dig a little bit deeper, I actually realized like what a debt I owed the character of Zorro to things that I love, because Zorro as a character came back, was invented, I believe, in 1919 as as a pulp serial kind of action adventure hero, and as an archetypical masked vigilante with a secret identity and kind of a laissez-faire public persona. He actually is probably the most direct inspiration for the character who was my single greatest obsession at this time, Batman. When I was in the 90s and then in the 2000s, it was Star Wars, it was Batman, and it was Lord of the Rings, which truthfully not much has changed. Maybe added in the Song of Ice and Fire there. But when you saw, like, Batman essentially might not exist without Zorro, and the way that these stories were told. Truth be told, Star Wars owes him a debt too, because this was one of the big pulp serial adventures at the time that was massively popular, and it helped drive interest in that kind of storytelling. And the character of Batman owes such a debt to Zorro that, in fact, in multiple iterations of the Batman myth, the movie that that Batman goes to see with his parents, and when his parents die, in most iterations, is actually the 1940 version of the Mask of Zorro. And it's because Batman owes such an incredible debt to this character. But again, I didn't know any of this. This was all discovered after the fact. And I meant to bring it all now to realize that at the time, I thought this was just a kind of happy, pulp action adventure movie. I thought it might even be like completely original. It's not. This character has a long and storied history. And I'll just finish off by saying, with this specific era of movie making, this kind of swashbuckling storytelling, around the same time that I first saw this movie in 2003, 2004, there was another kind of swashbuckling adventure story in theaters that I was very obsessed with, The Pirates of the Caribbean. And lo and behold, I discover who wrote this movie. Ted Elliott and Terry Rossio, who also wrote Pirates of the Caribbean. So this is actually something that was always in my wheelhouse, even if I never realized it.
Which is another movie which, for a lot of people, if my Tumblr feed is to be believed, it was a bisexual awakening for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Which, oh my God, can't believe that.
Right.
I see a pattern here.
Let hot people fight with swords.
I mean, it's a pretty guaranteed bank. I'm just saying. So yeah.
Oh God, yeah. No, and I did get to go see this in theaters. As a matter of fact, the thing that I remember about before I saw the movie was because this came out just a little bit after, the next year after Titanic had come out. And I think Titanic was like still doing business in theaters when this came out. Yeah, man, what a weird time that was. Titanic just kept on playing and playing.
They were like, we got nothing else, man. Sorry.
And I remember finding after like getting the Titanic soundtrack and listening, I became really familiar with the name James Horner. And then I was in the I'm trying to think where it was. Maybe it was the Walmart or I don't know, one of those stores, and going through the CD department. Oh yes, when stores still had a CD department, and came across the soundtrack album to the Mask of Zorro, and oh my God, it's got that same name. I bet it sounds exactly like Titanic. Not so much. But then shortly after I saw the movie itself, and I do remember that this had a long buildup of promotion. I think the film had actually been delayed by like at least a couple months to maybe a half a year. So the original teaser for The Mask of Zorro was in theaters, shown in front of other movies for like ever. And so by the time it was coming out, it's like, oh my God, when is this Zorro movie coming out? And that original teaser and really all the trailers were just so effective. They used the music from, I want to say, I don't know, it was one of those Hans Zimmer, scored action movies. And it was really catchy, which, by the way, I was disappointed wasn't on the soundtrack at the time. Oh, trailer music. Gotta love it. So I just remember always having this movie in the back of my mind. And so when I finally saw it, it was just like, it's one of the best summer blockbuster action movies ever created. I said to Jared last week, I was like, I don't remember what the critical appraisal of this movie was, but it doesn't matter because this is one of those critic-proof movies that is just so much fun, and it's so beautifully executed that like it is like, it is akin to movies like The Mummy and Pirates of the Caribbean in that it's such a crowd pleaser, and done with so much skill that you just can't help but fall in love with it. And of course, again, I was a young boy, and I actually had been aware of Catherine Zeta-Jones before this, because I think she did like a TV miniseries version of Titanic, which was not the James Cameron movie. And I remember when I saw her in that, I was like, oh dear God, who is that? and then she just walks onto the scene in this movie, but she's speaking with a Spanish dialect, and so she's even hotter. And so I was just head over heels in love. Yeah. But this was also Antonio Banderas had obviously done Desperado before this. So he was like known, but this was for him also just an explosion where he came onto the scene, and like he just became a household name after this. And yeah, no, it's just, this is one of those movies where you can just always turn it on, and it's always going to be as amazing and as wonderful as it's. God, how many years has it been since this came out? Like, it's probably going
25.
somewhere between 25 to 30 years, and I don't think that it's ever going to, like, this is just going to be one of those classic movies. And yeah, I'm in love with it.
Well, and for me too, like, it's even more fun now than it was then, because, like, I don't know, I was talking to Paul earlier, and he sort of was talking about how we've become a little bit like consumed with realism in movies now, and like what realism is, and what is sort of, and I've been very vocal about sort of having been tired of grimdark for some time. Like, it's not really my scene anymore. And like, then you go to something like this, which again is not again, like, serious things happen here, but it's so fun. Oh, did Jared lose power?
Yeah.
Ruh-roh. Well, we'll endeavor without him for a little while, but come back, Jared. So,
yeah.
But yeah, like, it's like, I feel like everything, it was so much more fun to go and be like, wow, when movies were like this, I really liked movies. Like, not that I don't like movies now. I just, it was just reminded me of how much fun this kind of stuff used to be, So, and again, The Mummy always does that for me as well. Just a sort of a movie with great performances. Everyone here, like Antonio Banderas, most of all, is clearly having the best time with this. Like, especially like in his like bushy hair and like all that stuff. He's clearly just having like the most wonderful time doing this. Sorry.
Oh, we've got an echo, Jared.
Okay, better? Okay, yeah. It was just like, and then you get him into the sort of Zorro stuff, and it's, especially the sort of, I don't know, I think probably what I think is maybe the funniest scene in the whole movie, when he's doing the whole huge flourishes and all those stuff, and then Anthony Hopkins just knocks the sword right out of his hand. Like, he's like just doing all this big, huge stuff. That whole thing is hilarious. Antonio Banderas is perfect doing it. It's just really like really funny and fun, and in a way that I don't know, watching him have that much fun is part of the reason why it's so fun.
Let's take a minute to see if we're gonna have Jared, because right now you're muted, Jared, and I know we were getting feedback.
No.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully we'll
go as he can.
Oh wait. Hey,
can you guys hear me?
Yes, and I think the echo is gone. So yeah, we're good.
I had to switch over to my phone with the app, so we're gonna have to make this work for at least the next little bit, just because we did in fact lose power here in the Bay Area. So
that's fine. Yeah, I actually remember I did a stream. I was a guest on somebody's channel one time, and this was back when I hadn't figured out that I needed to wire my connection straight into the computer, and my wireless was very unreliable, and I signal kept going out, and finally I was like, God damn it, I'm just trying to get on my phone. And so yeah, that'll work perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we have Erin here, just so if I do end up falling out, you aren't going to be left by your lonesome. Just carry on without me if that happens. But sorry for the disruption.
Yeah, God, it's me talking to myself. That would be that would be totally new. No, but yeah, no. What you were saying, Erin, about I was saying earlier about how this is a throwback kind of movie to a different age of movie making and story, but it is nice to watch a movie that it doesn't shy away from drama. It's not a comedy, but there's a lot of humor in it, and it's just a fun movie. But it also emotionally grips you. And it doesn't have to be one or the other, and so it does seem like, and not to make this like, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because I want to talk about this movie, not about what I find displeasing about other movies, but like we do kind of live in this time where there's a lot of movies where it seems like it's either or. It's got to be super funny and and we're not really necessarily taking anything seriously, or let's go super, super dark and, and make sure the audience is really moody with, with the characters. And there's a wonderful balance to be struck. And I think movies like this just do such a great job at that.
While still feeling tonally consistent as well. Like, It's not like the tone is not all over the place. There's just some jokes in the story. Unfortunately, I like watching, and I want to make very clear, this is only in fiction and only when it doesn't actually happen. But like watching people hurt themselves on all the jokes with him and the horse where he keeps getting knocked out every time. I was dying laughing about that. Like I laughed every single time, but that's just, I find that really funny. And it's also like, he's not really used to riding this horse. So it kind of makes sense that he's bad at it, and also the horse is kind of a jerk, I don't know. That kind of stuff, but it didn't feel like it was like out of place or that it came out of nowhere. Because sort of right away when you get into the brothers, you get that this is going to be sort of not a totally serious movie, even though, and obviously then it's like, ha ha ha, and then, Joaquin shoots himself and that's not great. But, it feels totally consistent because they pepper these in throughout. They don't just sort of come out of nowhere in the middle of the drama. They're also well placed for the most part. Yes, exactly.
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily blame the horse. He was stolen. But no, you mentioned like the comedy that comes in like right even with the brothers when they come on screen. Like I just love their all their banter with Jack and all that stuff.
That's Jack.
and then I love watching when after they reveal that the whole thing's set up and he pulls out his guns and the one guard is like, "I thought you were tied up," and he goes, "That's because you were stupid." it's so great. I love it.
Yeah, well, even just after that with the cacti and they're all like tied around and like clearly like their junk is in the cactus, and I'm just like, this is just like a really like funny like slapsticky like thing in a movie that then takes a really like abrupt turn to the serious and stuff. But that kind of stuff is peppered in all over, and so it's consistent with what it does, so it doesn't feel like the tone is shooting all over the place, so.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And really quick, just another bit in that part that I wanted to mention. I found really funny. What is the one guy say they've got some kind of box in the wagon, and Joaquin is like, "We know. That's why we came." But speaking of like the next scene, and that's when we haven't even gone through all the other characters, so I don't know why I'm automatically jumping to the villain. But in that next scene, we do get Captain Love, which that's a great villain character, and played by, I think the actor's name is Matt Lesher.
Yeah, he is actually based on a real life California ranger, and who actually captured the Joaquin Murrieta, who was the inspiration for Alejandro's brother. So they're actually, I mean, obviously it's heavily fictionalized, but they're actually, the name is not random. It was Captain Harry Love was his name, and he did capture a notorious bandit, but I do think that Zorro himself, obviously being a fictional character, it's more of a framework rather than any kind of jumping off point.
Sure.
Yeah, no, and I know I've seen him in other things. I think he had a bit part in the 1993 film Gettysburg as well, which had a cast of like thousands. But I know I've seen him in other stuff too. He's a good actor, and he does such a great job being a real son of a bitch in this movie. Even before he pulls out the body parts in jars.
Yeah, he's a real dick. So yeah. Oh.
I always try to come with the facts and the backstories and the themes. That's kind of my niche on the channel.
But anyway, before we even get to that part, like I want to talk quickly about like the whole opening sequence, because Erin, I'm not familiar with the old TV show. Like you're a bit more versed in it, but it does feel like that's probably a big throwback to like classic.
Definitely.
Zorro right there, yeah.
Definitely, especially because there's like the very sort of obvious, like, Zorro's it's not a complex thing, like it's like it's almost like you're kind of expecting, as a modern movie watcher, you're expecting this to blow up somehow and for Zorro to actually get tricked or something, and instead, no, this just plays Zorro knows exactly what's going on. He knows it's a trap. He comes in there and like the boys help him. Yes. But like, you never get any sense that like Zorro was in trouble here. You know what I mean? Like Zorro's meant to be the guy who is much, much smarter than the villains. And so it's like, that's it. Actually, at one point, like I said to Paul, I was like, that was the whole plan. Like the whole plan was like 4 guys in a turret, like that who had guns. Like that was your whole like, woo, gonna catch Zorro. It's like this didn't feel like a very good master plan. So you like I said, your brain is sort of trained to think these days. Oh, certainly there's 3,000 more men coming, and then they cut to Montero, and he's like, darn, we might as well be stomping on his hat. Like a darn, Zorro has foiled me again. And it's like. That's what the old Zorro is like. It's so there's no hidden hidden villains, and it's just Zorro just comes in and kicks ass and saves the day. There's never any tension really in any of these, other than like, oh, will the lieutenant actually turn Zorro over, or does he like Zorro so much that he'll let him go? But there's never any like, again with like the Batman, and also with this, my dad's, this is going to sound terrible, and I promise it's not, but he used to be like, you guys, I think this is the one where Batman dies. Like, and it takes you so long to figure out that like Batman never dies. Batman's never in danger of dying. Like Zorro is never in danger of dying. And that's also like, again, what sort of makes a lot of it like fun when you're a kid is there's no real stakes there. Zorro's going to be the smart guy. He's gonna, and I understand that at a certain point in your life that doesn't become narratively satisfying anymore, but like it was nice to kind of throw back to it at the beginning of this movie as well. So
yeah, but then of course things do go terribly wrong later on once Zorro gets home, because and in a lot of ways, I when I was watching this, and it's funny because I haven't even really seen the old TV show, but it did this whole, prologue kind of almost feels like a big series finale to like this classic Zorro. And even when Montero comes, to, his home and the duel starts off, it does feel like, oh, this is the like final battle between, Zorro and his nemesis. Of course, then things go horribly wrong. With Esperanza, she gets shot, and then if this was the series finale of an old Zorro TV show, man, this would be a super dark ending.
Yeah. I don't think that's what we're getting.
Actually, the guy, Anthony Hopkins plays Diego de la Vega, and that is the character who was Zorro in the old movies.
Yep.
So he is kind of playing the classic original Zorro. So your point, John, about this kind of being like a finale. Theoretically, if they didn't go to that extra scene of Montero arriving and the death of Diego's wife and the kidnapping of Elena, his daughter, it could have very well been a finale to a TV show. But instead, what it kind of becomes in a strange way is a little bit of a legacy sequel, because they ultimately, Antonio Banderas' Alejandro becomes the new Zorro, and he is effectively a new original spin on the character, although his name actually is a nod to the Diego's father in the old TV show was Alejandro. So they're kind of playing with the idea that this is a continuation, but ultimately what it really is kind of the idea that he expresses at the end of the movie, and that has been seen in recent Spider-Man storytelling, the idea anyone can wear the mask. Zorro has been many different men. What matters has been very many different men. What matters is the idea and the ideals and the what he fights for.
Well, and this is you guys mentioned before about how it's an inspiration for Batman. So this whole movie, honestly, it's a proto superhero story. And even the training of the next generation is very much that classic kind of if you want to continue to use Batman, like Batman passing on the cowl, which is used in so many superhero stories. Even Batman Begins has a little bit of that, even though it's not Batman training his replacement, but very much with Liam Neeson's character in that, and the training montage, that all that stuff. There's a legacy of that, and even to the point where once Alejandro is actually given the proper Zorro mask, and then he shows up in costume, it did feel like that part of the superhero movie where the superhero finally gets his proper costume, and there's a thrill about that. And so I love it, because it does feel like it's like a period piece superhero story, which I love.
Given the fact that it came out in 1998, a lot of people tend to consider our modern era of superhero storytelling to have started in 1998 with Blade, and then really kind of off in 2000 with the first X-Men movie. Obviously, Adam West back everything, and Christopher Reeve Superman have predated this, but you're not wrong in the sense that it actually does feel kind of like a superhero movie featuring one of the original pulp style superheroes, even though he doesn't have superpowers. He effectively is, as we've said, proto Batman in a lot of ways. So it's cool that this movie kind of does serve as kind of a precursor to what we would see in the superhero era, as well as being just classic pulp adventure that we would also see with things like The Mummy and Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah. Oh God. I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time just not grinning ear to ear, from the experience of watching this today, because I love how old fashioned and and fun and adventurous the story is. I was grinning like a stupid idiot watching this today, and and it's just so much fun. Just the way the story unfolds, even stuff like, once, Montero tapes Elena, and, you know, like it's storming, there's rain coming down and the fire's raging, and you got Anthony Hopkins, you know, on the bars going, "You'll never be rid of me, never," and it's just so wonderfully like
pulp. It's pulp.
Yeah, pulp. Yeah, it's it's
Which
just wonderful.
It's not. People tend to think of pulp as like as a derogatory term. I tend to be very like vocal in my defense of it, because pulp serial storytelling is kind of what gave us a lot of the modern storytelling that we have today. It was a direct inspiration for Lucas with Star Wars, which of course makes it near and dear to my heart. But Indiana Jones as well. Like any kind of, you know, adventure serial kind of feel where the hero is constantly getting himself into trouble and constantly getting himself out and meeting colorful villains and wacky characters, and, you know, damsels who appear to be damsels in distress but actually can fend for themselves quite well. That's pulp storytelling, and the idea that it's somehow lesser is something that I never want to, you know, give any quarter to, just because, as you say, people like some people would see it as more childlike or something that, you know, oh, it's not the most complex storytelling, you know, so what? This is the kind of storytelling that has been entertaining people for centuries, all the way back to the old penny dreadfuls in England and even beforehand, you know. So it's actually part of a very old storytelling tradition. It's not ever meant to be something that you know, as you say, like the highbrow critics were going to love, but that's just because, you know, they aren't necessarily placing value on the things that it offers, and the things it offers are more colorful by design.
Yeah. Okay, we're to go now.
Well, we had talked about the opening sequence, and one of the things I did kind of want to highlight there is even though the fact that this movie is very lighthearted and poppy and pulpy and fun, it starts, as we've alluded to, with a very real tragedy and trauma. You know, the fact that it opens with Montero actually getting the jump on Diego and invading his home, and ultimately leading to his wife's death and kidnapping his daughter. That's horrific, you know. It's like it's the thing that motivates Diego for the rest of the movie. And then, you know, and shortly after that, Alejandro, our new hero, watches his brother kill himself to avoid being tortured and captured by an evil ranger. So this movie starts from a very real dark place, and that is essential because we're going to be having a lot of fun with swords throughout the rest of the movie. But the thing that ultimately drives our characters forward is a desire for justice to be done and for personal revenge in some ways. But then ultimately the thing that allows the characters to grow is the recognition that is a thing that we talked about when we talked about the Batman. It's not enough to be devoted to revenge and hate and, you know, bringing down your enemies. You have to stand for something more. And that goes back to what we saw in the original opening scene, which is that Zorro is ultimately at its best a champion of the people. And
yeah, what I like is that even Diego needs to be reminded of that as the movie goes on. That because he's perfectly content to, you know, go off and just, you know, and then not that he hasn't earned it, but to just be concerned about, you know, his daughter and personal concerns, but even, you know, he in the end will come and you know, and stand up for the people, and I like that. But what I was going to say about when Montero comes into into their home. I do want to talk about like all the drama of all that, and and I love how got selfish Montero is just with and egotistical, and he's such a great character and superbly acted. But first I have to mention that I love the way that fight is staged, because this is another thing that we don't see a lot of nowadays. I love how the camera just kind of sits back and you're allowed to watch these two swordsmen go at it. And it's so often the tendency nowadays to just let's have the shaky cam and let's be there with the characters as they're struggling, and to just sort of tape out it again. It lends itself to that classical feel that the movie has, which just harkens back to sort of old style sword fights. So I love that. I love, and when I say love, I mean I absolutely despise the character, but the fact that Montero is like, his whole speech, I'm sorry I couldn't defend this country from the peasants who have run it. I'm sorry I couldn't make you love me. Oh my God. And I'm sorry I have to leave you without a husband. Like, oh, woe is him. Oh, he's the victim. But he's played so well. So yeah, I love that character, and I love the little moments that that he's given. I'm actually blanking on the actor's name who plays him.
Stuart
Wilson.
Stuart Wilson. Which is so funny, because the first time I think I ever saw him in anything was he was the villain in the third Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. So I always go back to that. And he's just really chewing up scenery in that one. But there's little moments of, like, not that he isn't through and through a monster, but like he's given moments of humanity, and which I think just makes for a much more effective villain. I like the fact that when Captain Love immediately jumps later in the movie to saying, and we destroy all the evidence, and and Montero says, and the workers, and he says, we destroy all the evidence. And there's very much this look on Montero's face of like, he's like, he has severe like misgivings about that. Doesn't mean he's not going to go through with it and go and do it. But I like that the movie shows him as conflicted about moments like that, because it makes it much more interesting to me than just, oh, he's always jumping to the most villainous course. He's a villain, absolutely, and he does some monstrous things, but I just think moments like that, and the love that he shows for Elena, even though he stole her, but it's just these little touches that make him in some ways even more villainous for his humanity. So I like that. I think it's a great turn as a villain, because in these movies, like, you want to have really compelling, interesting villains to go along with your heroes. You don't want them just to be two-dimensional. So
yeah, no, he is not like there's the old adage about all the best villains believe they're the heroes in their own story. And the thing about Don Raphael is that he does know that he's doing evil things. Like, he knows that he is, he has no regard for the peasants. He views them as, just fodder to serve his whims. He's willing to kill them all at the end. But from his perspective, he is law and he is right and he is entitled because of his class and his station. And he when he confronts Diego and tells him you're a traitor to your country and your class, he believes that because he sees himself as an avatar for the Spanish crown at the time, even though they're about to cede California to Santa Anna in Mexico. And he's disgusted that Diego, who was a member of the privileged class, would choose to side with these commoners. And hounded by the fact that, Esperanza, even though we don't get to see the backstory, she clearly at one point chose Diego over Raphael and clearly has no regrets about it. And it's a wound that's been left at Raphael's core because, we don't see him take another wife. He clearly still is deluding himself into believing that, he was, that Esperanza loved him and should have been him. And throughout the movie, even though he, when he kidnaps Elena and raises her as his daughter, it's unclear throughout the movie just how much he actually believes that himself, because he just, even after the illusion has clearly fallen away, even after Elena herself knows the truth, he still refers to Elena as my child, my daughter. When Diego confronts him at the hacienda, he's like, your daughter is dead, De La Vega. You cannot have mine. And then when he has her, he takes her at gunpoint later as part of a ploy to try to save himself. But then he looks at Diego scornfully and says, "You really believe I would have killed my own?" And this is after he has already learned that Elena knows the truth, that she's freed Diego from prison, and that she is clearly willing to side with Diego against him. And it's just a sense that this man has lived and clung to this lie his entire life. And he just, even at the moment when he is bested and about to die, he is unwilling to let it go because he has nothing.
I wouldn't call it a lie, though, I guess is where I would cut. He raised her and he clearly cared for her and raised her well. He is her father in that sense, he's the person who raised Elena and who loved her, and again, who I guess you can sort of go back and forth, but seemed to genuinely love her as his daughter. You can sort of look at Elena, and again, there are less generous interpretations of this, but when you look at the character of Montero, you can look at her as the continuation of Esperanza. You can look at her as a big fuck you to Diego. You can look at her in a lot of sort of more ungenerous light, but the fact remains that Elena is a happy, healthy, sort of self-possessed woman who seems to have been taught to use a sword and given leniency to express her opinions to a certain extent. She's not being beaten down for it or anything like that. So in spite of the fact that it clearly rose from a horrific situation, he was still her dad in a certain way, and she saw him as such as well. That's why she tries to defend him in the end from Diego. So I think it's not necessarily a lie, but he's still a piece of shit. You know what I mean? There's no way around that. I'm not trying to be but his love for his daughter makes him no. But I do think it's a little bit I just want to be careful of being the person that raises a child isn't their real father or something like that, because he's just, he told her a bunch of other lies. So.
I never that was the interpretation. He clearly, as you say, Erin, he gave her a very advantageous childhood and brought her up well, and clearly loved her in his own way. It's just, I kind of see that love as a more selfish love, because when he steals her, kidnaps her from Diego at the beginning and tells Diego that I want you to live and suffer as I have suffered, knowing that your child should have been mine. And in that way, he feels like he's trying to say that, Esperanza should have been me. Elena should have been my biological child, but she's not. so I'm going to make her my child. And he lives that lie his entire life. Now, the lie, I don't think his feelings for her are a lie, but I think it's the original sin of taking
Sure.
the child from her father who loved her after the death of her mother is something that, whether or not really the only person who would be able to say whether or not that was right is Elena herself. Because we have seen stories, we just mentioned Guardians of the Galaxy, back in the second one, Peter Quill is taken from his biological father by Yondu, and it turns out that even though Yondu doesn't treat him well throughout most of his life, Yondu was a better father to him than Ego ever would have been. And at the end, Peter Quill chooses to side with the man who raised him. And we've seen constant stories throughout Star Wars and the like, children who reject their biological family and go with the person who truly loved them and raised them. And we see that well. But in this case, Elena herself doesn't seem, she clearly doesn't want Raphael to die. She doesn't want him hurt. But when the truth comes out, she chooses Diego and because I believe she sees that he is on the side of right. And that moment when she stands in front of the guards to shield Diego's life, and then he's being taken away, and he just turns back and says to Raphael, she knows. And that's all he needs to say. But we don't see Raphael reckon with it, but he knows in that moment as well. He doesn't even talk to Elena when that moment happens. He just walks away. And I feel like Elena herself probably understands Raphael and, still probably loves him as her father in many ways, but also she makes her choice. And I think that we're meant to see it ultimately as a rectifying of the great wrong that was committed when she was taken 20 years ago. But as you say, it's a far more complicated issue than one would have you believe. And definitely, if they had played it up that Raphael was a monstrous father to her, there would be no ambiguity whatsoever. The fact that they do make it more ambiguous is one of the virtues of this movie, because it makes it more emotionally complex.
I think too, there's I guess I would be interested in hearing a little bit more. When you say you think she makes a choice, she chooses Diego. It doesn't sort of seem like that to me. It seems like she chooses to free Diego and then go stop this monstrous thing that her father is doing. But I guess maybe I would have liked to have seen Elena reckon with any of it afterwards, that both of her fathers weren't dead. Did she choose Diego, or did she choose to help Diego and then sort of go stop the really bad thing that was happening? You know what I mean? It doesn't seem like she chose between the two men necessarily. She just more chose to do what was right in that moment.
I will say that there is because I went ahead today and watched a couple of the deleted scenes, because after I was done watching the movie, I was like, hey, and I want more. There's a moment right after Diego is taken away, that scene where the truth comes out, where that was cut out, where she turns to him and asks, is that man my real father? And it's interesting, his choice of words, because he says, you heard the truth, and then he says, I'm your father. And so that might actually add credence to what Jared was saying about that he's lived this lie, or his truth, for so long. I think maybe he just he won't even leave room to to acknowledge the actual truth. But yeah, no, I don't know. For me, it does feel like she's very clearly wanting to, like, her preference of that whole situation is that, like, she understands that something needs to happen, that there has to be some kind of reckoning between the two men, but she also repeatedly saves both of them by stepping in front. So I don't think that I do think it's very complicated. I think ideally in her mind, the two men could walk away.
We can all just get along.
And,
yeah.
Because it does seem like, and I'm joking here a little bit because I think it's done beautifully. I think Catherine Zeta-Jones' performance is great, but it does seem for a little bit there's a lot of Elena screaming and stepping in front of bullets.
The editing at the end is a little wonky in places. Like, there's certainly, like, I love this movie and it's mostly beautiful and fantastic, but the editing in the end is a little bit, you're like, wait, where is she? Oh, wait, oh, no, okay. Okay, no, wait, no, she's going to sit. No, wait, what? So yeah, it's a little weird in that end part. So it does seem like she's throwing herself in front of guns like way too many times for one battle scene. So yeah.
But yeah, no, I like the ambiguity of it. To me, I think I tend to agree with you, Erin, that I don't think it's very clear cut about, well, she learns the truth, she rescues Diego. That doesn't mean that, you know, it's as clear cut as she chooses Diego over Raphael, because Raphael did raise her. And so I think there's just a lot of conflicted emotions that she's going through. And the decision is kind of made for her because Raphael is.
If Raphael isn't in the middle of doing a horrific thing, does she make the same choice? You know, like, it's like, so yeah, I'm totally with you on that. Yeah.
And speaking of his Raphael's, we'll call it his exit from the story. One thing that I really loved, which I don't think I ever noticed before, it's when, you know, he thinks he's got Diego cornered, and it's like, it's that last minutes of, you know, and it looks like he's about to make some kind of final remark, like the villainous thing where, you know, he's got to make some kind of, you know, pronouncement before he deals the death blow. But Diego sees his opening with the, you know, thing that's going to catch his leg. He doesn't bother saying anything. He just acts. He's like, he saw the, you know, the Mountain versus the Red Viper fight. He like he knows what he needs to do, and it's not make some last pithy comment.
No, let's do the thing.
Yeah. So I actually love that, because it almost feels like Raphael is like I said, that he's on the verge of making some big final, you know, comment, and then he's cut short because it's like, oh no, I'm just being dragged to my death.
On top of Captain Love, which is great.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Oh, that final scream from Captain Love is so great, and then he gets smashed by all that gold. It's perfect.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best, you know, death screams ever, in terms of just. Yeah, he was already done for because he had the sword impaled into him. But then, of course, you know, they drop a mountain of gold bricks and a cart on top of him. So, and he still gets his last. But yeah, all I was going to say, just to wrap up the discussion about the choice that Elena makes, like, I think you guys are right that, you know, she ultimately, what she wanted, I think, was to know the truth. Because from the moment she arrives in California, you know, she's like, oh, I recognize the smell of these flowers. And then, but it turns out, then they're like, they only grow here in California. And I believe this is your first time on these shores. And you can see the wheels kind of turning in her mind. And then, of course, she meets her former nanny in the market, who tells her that she's the daughter of Esperanza and Diego de la Vega. And she isn't ready for that knowledge at the time, so she just puts it aside, says she can't accept it. But in the moment when she learns that when Diego confronts Raphael and she learns the truth, I think the choice that she makes is that she accepts that truth, that Diego is her real father. But that doesn't mean that she rejects Raphael. I think she ultimately would have liked him to live. When Diego is about to shoot him, she, as you say, shields him. And then, of course, she doesn't get to make that choice because she goes off to, the choice she does make is she goes off to save the people who are in the cages, who, unfortunately, Diego and Alejandro are not focused on saving at the moment because they're both focused on killing their respective enemies. So Elena is the one who gets the people out of the cages, but they tell her to do that.
But I was going to say, I actually like the fact that that Diego, while he's fighting Raphael, makes a point to say to Elena to go rescue the civilians, because that to me shows that he's acknowledging what Alejandro said earlier about what about the people. And so I like the fact that that's a focal point for him, that's on his mind, that he's not completely disregarding them for the sake of his revenge. He's focused on that, but he wants to also make sure that the people are saved, and he entrusts his daughter with that. And so I really like that touch, because I think it brings his character full circle. It's showing that sometimes the aged mentor figures who have gone through all this before, sometimes they need to learn the lesson again of that they still have to, even if most of their focus is on the personal vendetta, they do still need to have a concern for larger things. I like it when our heroes are flawed and they have to learn these mistakes again. Remind us of anything. We won't get into that. But yeah. So I liked that, and plus I love watching Catherine Zeta-Jones, fire off a gun to get the prisoners out, which was great. I do remember in the trailer they combined the shot of her firing off the gun with the big explosion, so it looked like she was setting off an explosion.
I like your point there, John. It was interesting because I think my read of it was that Diego was sending her away so she didn't because he knew how it was going to end, and so she didn't have to see either one of them kill the other. So he was trying to send her away from there so they could she didn't have to watch while either of them died. But I don't think our interpretations are conflicting. Maybe it was a little bit of both, but I really like yours there as well. So it's also I did wish sort of at the end they hadn't showed Captain Love very easily stopping the explosion by cutting the fuse with his sword before, because then you're like, well, why didn't they just do that instead of going and shooting all the locks off of this? It seemed like they showed you earlier a slightly easier way, a very much easier way to do this that would have guaranteed nothing and no one exploded. So it was I was just kind of like, maybe if they just hadn't shown him doing that before, this would have felt a little more dramatically tense. But yeah, so
yeah, but she was in a different part when that part of the movie was being shown.
Right.
So
right. I don't think she saw it. I just, but as a viewer, I was like, what else you could do though? So,
but also we need a big explosion at the end.
Right.
So
we missed the pleasure of seeing Catherine Zeta-Jones shoot that pistol too, if we do it the easy way. So yeah.
And I also speaking of Captain Love, I really love the fact that after he gets stabbed by Alejandro, that Alejandro takes off the mask, and Antonio Banderas just does this wonderful thing when he takes it off of this really intense stare, and just the way this movie shoots I'll go ahead and say it, the way this movie shoots all these really beautiful people doing dramatic things is just it's so amazingly shot, and the music, the fact that also we get James Horner's 3-note danger motif in that moment, which he uses in so many films, And a lot of people have taken him to task for that over the years, but I look at it as a staple of his scores, and I love it because it does make you like kind of, it adds a nostalgic feel to everything. It's like, because it's in everything from like this film to Willow to the Star Trek films to even Troy. You know, a lot of his scores have it, so it just adds that little extra special touch. But yeah, no, it's I when I was watching, I was like, I love that, you know, if there's one thing that'll hold true for you know, big spectacle movies, whether it's, you know, a brand new, you know, superhero MCU movie, or it's a, you know, 1998 Zorro movie, you have to end these movies with a big bang, and
Yeah.
and that holds true.
There's that old, like, is a skit from, I think, the MTV Movie Awards for a long time, cool guys don't look at explosions. Like, and it's like the whole, it's just a whole montage of like people walking away from explosions without like looking back, which is like so perfectly like 90s, you know? So yeah.
Well, and it's funny because there's another deleted scene for this movie where when they're walking out of the, you know, the mist after the explosion has gone off, there's actually a scene where Santa Ana and his men actually ride up to find them. That was cut out of the movie. I think it was cut out just because of the sequencing of like when they go back up to find Diego, and the way that cut together with the ending of the movie. So, but yeah, if I was the actor who was playing Santa Ana, I'd be kind of pissed off about that.
Agreed. You're gonna play Santa Ana. You're gonna be in one scene, and we're not even gonna put that in the movie. So yeah.
And actually, I don't know the actor's name, but he's the guy who played the villain in Desperado. Actually,
Oh wow.
he's a very famous Mexican actor. I just don't. I just don't know his name, and I don't think he's on the cast list because he didn't end up in the movie. But yeah, no. So okay, so we cut to the end of the movie. We've talked about the beginning and the end of the movie. I don't know. Let's just. I don't know. Let's. We are actually an hour and 13 minutes. This is what we'll do. We'll take the mid roll, and then we'll start fresh, and we'll just pick, you know, a spot to discuss. It'll be a clean break. Okay, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to this wildly random discussion of the Mask of Zorro. We do, as discussed earlier, we have the next several weeks planned ahead. And next week, Jared, I don't know about you, but I have already started my rewatch of The Bad Batch for our retrospective of seasons 1 and 2. And I am having the time of my life. Oh my God, that is a gorgeous show. I venture to say it may be the most gorgeous thing in Star Wars. I know that's probably might be a controversial thing to say, but I think the animation is so unbelievably gorgeous that I don't know. It's and we can certainly get into that when we have that discussion next week. But I'm about I think I'm about 5 episodes in so far, so I've got a head start into the week where I'm going to be binging to get through the entire first 2 seasons. And then after that, the next week, we're actually going to be doing that Bad Batch discussion on Saturday. And I think we're sticking to 6 o'clock. And we'll do it on Saturday because on Sunday is the Super Bowl, correct?
Yes, it is.
I knew it was some sports thing. I just forgot what it was, which says a lot about me. Then the next week we'll be back to Sundays, and Erin will be back, and joining us will be Cecilia. from Geekstralia, and we'll be talking about The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. We'll be doing a season 1 review. And then the week after that, I said that as if I knew exactly, but I've kind of been...
We'll be going
okay, yeah. So the next week after that will be the season 3 premiere of The Bad Batch, which will be the first 3 episodes. And then the Sunday after that, March 3rd, we'll be talking about The Witch with our good friends Laura and Blue Lemons. So there, we've we've got a good schedule of things coming up.
I would also personally like to beg you, if you really just are coming to shit on Rings of Power, please give the stream a skip, because we all like the Rings of Power. We think it's good. We're not here for that. So please, if you hated this series and you do not have anything good to say about it, please just maybe give the stream a skip, because I'm not saying it was perfect in every way, but we all liked it, and that's probably what we're going to focus on. So yeah.
Yeah, if any of you, if we have any of our usual, Lord of the Rings stream regulars, on here who are wondering, hey, John, why didn't you invite me on for that? I love you guys, but this really is going to be a very affectionate stream. And yeah, I've heard some of you make your critical appraisals of the show already, and this is not that stream. I very purposely made this stream for a few of us who just honestly want, not to say we won't say when something maybe could have been done a little better, this way or that, but I think for each of us this is very much going to be a showering appreciation on this show, which I know was very important for me at a tough time, in my life. And so I'm looking forward to just talking, I'm going to be talking glowingly about it. And so we're just looking for a fun time talking about a really good show. So again, if you're somebody who is coming to this looking for what you got with the Hobbit stream, this ain't that.
Then we still talked very affectionately about the Hobbit for the most part too. Like, we just had a slightly more focusing on the funny negative stuff than we normally would, but we talked really good about the Hobbit for the most part too. So
I've even like Jared and I have been talking about, he and I are going to break down each of the Hobbit movies in the future, because actually like, you all are rolling your eyes at me. I can see it now, but I have misgivings about how negative I went on that stream, and I want to have a different kind of discussion about those movies.
Those were we watched them. Paul and I just watched them recently, and Paul was like, "These were not nearly as bad as people said they were," and I was like, "No, they were not." So yeah.
Anything you want to add, Jared, about the upcoming discussions or anything else?
Yeah, no, I'm really looking forward to everything we've got coming up. In terms of the Bad Batch, John and I adore that show. We know it's probably not quite as widely seen as some of the other properties that we may discuss on the channel, but this is, if you don't feel intimidated necessarily, it will be spoilers for the first 2 seasons in that discussion, but I would also encourage you to see it as an opportunity, if you haven't watched Star Wars The Bad Batch, to give it a try, because it is a show that is very rewarding both to fans of longtime fans of Star Wars animation, but you don't actually necessarily need to have even seen the Clone Wars to appreciate something like this. It's a great story about kind of a misfit found family, and it in a time of encroaching evil and fascism. So it's great on that merit as well. And we want to be inclusive to people who may not have, had the same affection for the show that we do, give it a try. Watch the first couple episodes. The pilot episode in particular is it's like a little mini movie. It's like 70 minutes long. Give that a watch and see what if you want to continue with the rest of the show, because I think that's one of the best episodes, honestly.
I was really impressed. And I knew it was great, but just sitting down to watch that again, because they did a great job with that, because it's on the scale of what they did with the finale of Clone Wars. It very much feels like a companion piece to the 4-episode finale of that show, but also but you don't need to have seen that. It's a story that picks up in the aftermath of what happens in Revenge of the Sith, which, even if you haven't seen Revenge of the Sith, I think, culturally you have a general idea of, the clones turn against the Jedi and there's a big massacre. And that's really all you have to know, as setting the stage for the show. And then everything else is pretty much self-contained. There's references to stuff throughout Star Wars, but it's not, it's not required for you to enjoy the series. So,
yeah. And so we'll, as you said, we'll talk about the first 2 seasons, and then we will be following along with season 3 as it every couple of weeks as it premieres and then goes through to its ultimate series finale. But in terms of the Rings of Power, all I just want to say is, while the 4 of us who will be on the discussion will all be in full-throated, unabashed love for the show, if you have more complicated feelings about it, please still join us in the discussion. We will be talking about the more things about its place in the Lord of the Rings canon and certain choices that they may have made. We'll be doing it from a perspective of people who love the show. But if you want to just kind of engage with us and have that kind of discussion, by all means, we'll welcome it. All I'll say is the 2 points of view that we're not going to indulge at all are, 1, this show shouldn't exist. If that's the way you feel, then yes, probably skip the stream. And 2, I don't anticipate anything with our friend group, because I think we're all very, respectful about it. But anyone who has larger social concerns about the show, i.e. mad about the fact that they're black dwarves, definitely skip the show, because that's the one point of view that we have no tolerance for. But in terms of just its overall place as a Lord of the Rings story, there's room for all different kinds of points of view, and we would love to have that discussion with you. So please join us there. We just want you to know that there won't necessarily be someone on the stream in these 4 boxes who is coming at the show primarily from a critical, I didn't like it perspective. But if you want to present that point of view respectfully in the chat, by all means, we'll engage with you. Yeah,
there's plenty of that elsewhere online. So I think if that's the stream you want to watch, your bases are covered. Go look elsewhere. But I love how you're being more diplomatic, Jared. I'm like, if you're negative about the show, this isn't the stream for you. And Jared's like, but you can still come and watch. I appreciate that, because I'm a little more, I can't help but be defensive.
I've just seen the people that show up in these streams in the comments, and I'm like, not these John Webster film, but in the streams about Rings of Power, modding for Voice of Geekdom and some other stuff. I'm just this ain't gonna be it for you, man. So
and if I don't control the mod of God button, but if we do get trolls in the chat, they will be blocked. So we just
I very much plan on having a tab open with the actual YouTube stream so that I can block any the first sign of any racist comments or anything of the like, and you're gone. So I hope you'll enjoy that 2 seconds thrill that you'll get from that, but that will be your last if that's what you come for. Okay, and so yeah, I think we've pretty much covered. I can't wait for those discussions. We're gonna have a blast. Let's go ahead and dive back into the Mask of Zorro. I'm like, we've talked about her, but I'm just gonna say that this is the designated go crazy over Catherine Zeta-Jones section of the stream, because you guys may notice that my screen caps that I got, there's a theme running through them. I could be accused of this. Being a little biased in my selection of images. But no, she really does. She's like a classic Hollywood screen goddess in this movie. I'm just going to say it. And let's be fair, fair and spread it around. As mentioned earlier, I think Antonio Banderas takes care of that on the other side of the spectrum as well. I will just say I'm trying to think of how old I was when this movie came out. It came out in '98, so I guess I was 14 years old. I do recall sitting in the theater, and I think it was my cousin's husband who took me to go see it one day, because I guess I must have been in Maryland on vacation seeing family. And I just remember sitting in the theater while the sword fight scene was going on. And I was like, there's something going on with my reaction to all this. And yeah, no, I had the time of my life watching this movie. And yeah, definitely one of my big, crushes as a kid. And yeah, and that has not dissipated. I was watching this today and I was like, good God. Just want to say, I think Catherine Zeta-Jones, her performance is astounding, and I want to be very respectful of all that. But oh my God, what an incredible beauty. And yeah, okay, I'll stop myself now.
I was just going to say, and as a very smart and sexy commenter pointed out earlier, the sword fighting is definitely impressive. And that's like that. She is really, really, really also impressive with that sword too. I mean, not just in that scene where obviously part of her dress gets cut off, which is nobody is mad about, but like she's very impressive. She gives like fun little flourishes and like, all this stuff too, that I think she kind of makes it her own there. And I mean, that sort of goes through the whole thing. Antonio Banderas also, Alejandro has much more of a brawler style with his sword play and stuff like that, which they sort of play into that as well with like what he would probably actually sword fight like. But I'm glad she kind of gets some of that too. She's not the major sword fighter in the film, but she looks so beautiful and elegant, and it makes me jealous of more than just her beauty. Like she's so graceful and enthusiastic and wonderful, and I'm just like, God damn it, So really, really an excellent scene. So
I love their banter in the fight. Just he's like, I don't have time to give you the proper instruction. She's like, I have had the proper instruction since I was 4. And yeah, it's so great. And of course the freaking innuendo in the scene where his sword pops up. It's like, okay, we're going there.
Same, but yeah.
Yeah. I'm so glad that you're bringing up the banter, because we can say it. The operative word for this movie, and specifically the dynamic between these two, is sexy. This is a sexy movie.
Yeah.
But it's also a romantic movie. You know, one of the elements of like the whole pulp serial adventure that I alluded to that Zorro is very much, you know, an embodiment of is romance, you know? And the thing about it is from the moment that these two characters come into contact with one another when he's kind of in his amateur Zorro phase with the bandana and is trying to steal Tornado. Yeah, that's the scene right there. You know, from the moment these two lay eyes on one another, they are attracted to each other. It's like an instantaneous chemistry that's not only inherent between the characters within the world of the movie, but between the actors. You know, you can tell that this is the kind of chemistry that actually feels authentic to us on screen. It's not just the movie telling us these are our two romantic leads, and so it's that like we from the moment we see these two, we're like we want to see these two together, and that connection kind of persists even though, you know, there's kind of an adversarial relationship between them, you know, particularly when Alejandro takes on his Don Alejandro persona and he gets to be more of the you know, the kind of arrogant nobleman that someone like Elena would actually be expected to marry, rather than the bandit to whom she's very, as they say in the confessional scene, lustful for.
Lustful.
Just slight sidebar, that scene in the confessional booth is one of the funniest scenes in, you know, in the entire movie, if not the
okay, and we're gonna get onto that, but just the way she replies, you know, lustful. I'm sorry. I'm like, I'm losing it now, but as a kid, I was like, Jesus Christ.
but it's yeah, it's meant to be the kind of, you know, and in that scene they're not even looking at each other, but just the voices tell you that even there's a connection between them even then. But when he takes on the Don Alejandro persona, you know, there's a spark of attraction between them there too, but it's different because, you know, he's of course playing a role then, and she is kind of trying to figure him out in more ways than one. And you know, his personality in that scene is deliberately kind of abrasive, you know, when he makes the comment about, you know, his only goal was to try to increase his holdings. He doesn't care about any of this other stuff. And you can tell she's a little put off by that. But then she has the scene where she's interrogating Bernardo, who is actually her father, Diego, in disguise. And she talks about how the fact that, you know, he seems like an arrogant kind of guy, but the way he, you know, looks at me and the way he dances with me, you know, it's as if he were two completely different men. And that you can tell that in that scene, Diego knows that, you know, the two of them are attracted to each other. And it's obvious to anyone with eyes in the dancing scene, because that is the kind of passion that you cannot fake. And we've given a lot of love to the swordplay scene already.
Can we just go ahead and say that just about every scene with the two of them is one of the hottest scenes in cinema history? Because
I just every time you show a still of her and then you come back, my face is like every single time. Every time like, oh, look at her go. And but that dancing scene is woo.
No, and the two of them just in that scene, you know, when effectively the world stops and everyone is watching them, you know, that kind of that's the frame. That's the frame where you can tell that these two are actually bringing the heat a little more than a little bit for each other. But when the scene is ongoing, and you can tell in that moment that Alejandro his goal was actually to try to bring Raphael back, because Diego had told him, you know, you can't let the Dons leave the table without you, and you can see that they're doing that. So his
way of dancing with Elena is to try to draw them back in. But of course, he gets swept up in it, and so does she, because she's trying to prove a point as well, that like, you don't know me, you don't think that you can't exert control over me.
I just want to brace you guys before I pop this next one up. Just be ready. Oh my.
Yeah, no, she was not doing that kind of thing with Captain Love earlier. This was their own kind of special thing that obviously leaves a great impression on them both.
Okay.
Keep them coming.
Yeah. Nobody's talking about this at all. So.
Yeah, no, I think that takes care of the dance scene. Those images. Don't worry, there's still more for other scenes to come. Okay, yeah. We're not concealing anything. This stream, it is what it is. All right. Anybody have anything else to say?
I mean, okay, sorry. We were talking about the party scene. One thing that they do in this movie, which I think is totally understandable, they have Anthony Hopkins, and they are going to milk Anthony Hopkins for all he is worth. Like, because there's all of these really sort of, and I don't know if it's editing, I don't know, but there's these really sort of strangely placed like reaction shots of Anthony Hopkins sort of interspersed through that whole thing, you know, where like he sees them together and they show him and he's like, you know, and then later it's like they show the other guy and he's like, no, you know, it's like they're like, we got Anthony Hopkins, like we got to put Anthony Hopkins in every shot that we could possibly get Anthony Hopkins in, and I am super here for it. It's just sometimes you're like, wait, are we back? Oh no, okay, yeah, but like especially when they're like going to dance together and he's like, you know, I was like, that one was maybe a little weird. Maybe it was supposed to show approval, but it kind of looked maybe a little odd for me, but no worries. But that was just...
I love that. Well, the reason why I love that, and maybe it is a little inappropriate, maybe, but I just love that in this sort of setting of time, you'd expect a father to have the reaction that Raphael has, where he's like, "What the shit?" But I love that her actual father, Diego, is just like, no, I want her to have that passion in her life. Right. You know? And so, yeah, no, I kind of like that he's really approving of, you know, of everything going on. But I just love Raphael's double take as he's walking and he's talking business. He's like, yeah.
Wait. It's my daughter? Wait, oh shit, yeah. But yeah, Anthony Hopkins is really good in this. Like, again, another character, or another actor that you can tell is having a really great time. It's funny, we were kind of talking about these. There's a couple interesting things about this, and one of them reminded me of a previous stream you had done, John, where like you're talking about the Batman movie, and it's like how Batman's not supposed to kill people, but Batman kills like a lot of people in that movie. And like this too, I was kind of shocked by how many people Zorro just clearly murders, you know, like, and I was like, oh, I guess but they sort of don't linger on any of it. And that's like the death scene with Anthony Hopkins is also a little truncated. Like, it's nice that they like all get a chance to say goodbye, but he's like, here's your hands, dead. You know, and I was like, they don't like to dwell on any of this stuff, which I super appreciated, because I'm not here for the maudlin, for the sad kind of stuff. Like, I'm here for the hand holding, not for the death. You know what I mean? So they sort of skip over a lot of this stuff that's really that I feel like helps keep the movie sort of lighter pace. Like I said, they milk Anthony Hopkins, but they don't make it overly maudlin, which they could with a character like Diego, who has had all of this pain and tragedy and all this other stuff. Like, they could really like make this a downer if they wanted to, but instead they sort of choose the route of like, no, we're not gonna do this. He's not gonna cough up blood and, like all this stuff. He's gonna do what he's got to do, and then he's dead. That's all good, so.
Well, I think because he's achieved what he set out to achieve. He's avenged both himself as well as his wife and the life that he and his daughter could have had together. She's safe. Again, going back to the fact that he wants her to be happy, and so the idea that he recognizes what's between her and Alejandro, like I think that gives him peace, and so I think he's at peace with dying at that point where he's probably been ready to die for years and years. So it's just he had his eye on revenge, but now he's also achieved something more than that. I think, and so his daughter's going to be happy. The legacy of Zorro also is going to be carried forward. So I think he is at peace. So it's not that much of a sad death, except I do feel sorry for Elena, because having just been reunited with her real father, or birth father, I should say, it's a shame that she doesn't get to, that relationship doesn't get to bear fruit. But I think you're right. I think it's given the appropriate amount of like pathos and emotion without dwelling for too long, so that the movie doesn't get super, super, super sad.
Right. And like another thing that I think is interesting about this, his character is the one who sort of gets the hero's choice in this movie, which I thought was really interesting. Not Alejandro. Like and it ends up sort of the way that the movie does it. It's not a super consequential one, but like he kind of makes the choice of like, you can go for your personal revenge, or you can go for like the greater good. Go with Alejandro and try to sort of help the people more so than this one like personal thing. Because Elena at this point is not in danger. That he's going to sort of do this sort of personal thing, and I thought that was a really interesting beat, because Alejandro is ostensibly the hero of this movie. Like, and then you have sort of Diego, who's actually the one given the choice, and he chooses maybe the thing that you wouldn't really expect him to do, which I thought was interesting. Again, turns out he could make it in time to help free the people anyway, so it's not like there were any. Again, this is not a maudlin movie. This is not a movie where people get blown up because Diego helped, did his own thing first, which again, I must state I cannot appreciate enough at this point. But it's sort of, I don't know, I just thought that was a really I don't know, like just an interesting choice at the end of the day to have him be the one that has to sort of make the choice that's typically given to the hero, in a movie where he's maybe supposed to be the old mentor, rather than the actual hero. So.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that, because the Diego and Alejandro are kind of on parallel arcs in the sense that they both want revenge, but they are at the start of the movie. Diego has an idea about, he's much more measured and restrained, whereas Alejandro is, much more keen to just race in and take his revenge immediately. There's the scene where they meet one another. Alejandro was ready to go kill Captain Love immediately, and Diego was just like, yeah, you would die. He's
grabs him by the neck, and I love the music in that moment.
I've never lost a fight except to an old cripple just now.
and Alejandro's movie is kind of, his arc is kind of learning to be more than just that bandit, and kind of try to pick up the mantle that he was inspired by as a child, when he and his brother were watching Diego as Zorro in the opening scene. And then, they were effectively doing what they needed to do at the beginning of the movie, stealing to live. But it means that Alejandro has ultimately become a much more selfish character, and his arc kind of leads him into not only becoming more like measured and restrained, but also becoming more selfless, because he learns that lesson. He learns it to the point that when he is confronted by Captain Love with his brother's head and hand in a jar, and he has to kind of sit there and smile and take it, that is something that the Alejandro at the beginning of the movie would not have been capable of doing. He's grown in that way. And in the very next scene, when he relates that to Diego, is then telling him that, I'm going to go take my daughter and do this for me because I've given my life to these people. And that's when Alejandro kind of snaps and has that speech where he's like, didn't you tell me that we were all doing this for a greater cause? And now you're going to go off and do something selfish. So he's kind of, in a weird way, to your point, Erin, he's almost completed his character arc by that point. He still hasn't fully taken his revenge on Captain Love, which he does. But at that point, when Diego tells him, the people will be okay because they still have Zorro, it's the truth in a weird way, because at that point, Alejandro has kind of become self-actualized. He has become less selfish. He has come to embody that someone who is worthy of taking up the mantle of Zorro. And so when he takes his revenge, it doesn't feel like he is, being selfish in that moment. It feels like he's earned the right to, take the life of the man. Not to the extent that it's ever justified to take a life. I would say that, in this case, Captain Love, being that he was...
But in a movie where they're killing people left and right, apparently.
Exactly.
They blow up a lot of people.
But yeah, Alejandro's kind of self-actualization comes a little bit earlier in the movie than you might expect, and that's because, to Erin's point, Diego is the one who ultimately, the original Zorro, has to learn that lesson again. There was I think I mentioned in that original scene, there's the line where it says that where when Diego encounters Alejandro, he says there's a very old saying, when the pupil is ready, the master shall appear. And he does, and he teaches Alejandro. And then, of course, in classic fashion, the student also teaches the master. And so that allows kind of the character of Zorro, who is split between these two very different men. They both get that moment in the end. They just get it at different times, and we, succeed and become the heroes.
Yeah, no, it's, and I can't help thinking about another line too, from another franchise, who we are what they grow beyond. You know that one, Jared?
I've heard it.
Yeah, I think it's beautifully done, and yeah, I do like that the movie ends with, with Diego still coming back to to help the people, and I think it's a great arc for his character, and yeah, it's beautifully done. I do want to take some time to go through because I think we've touched on some major set pieces of the movie, but there's just so many beautiful moments throughout the film that I really want to touch on, especially humorous moments. I love everything involving Diego training Alejandro. Erin, you mentioned earlier him just, flicking the sword.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Great. And I love, lesson number 1, never attack in anger. Lesson number 2, come with me. And then, and then, so what is lesson number 3? To get to lesson number 4. Oh god!
I love to before the tornado throws him the first time when he's like, "We are like one spirit," like he's like, "This is amazing," and the horse just goes ape shit, and I was like, "Hey, this is actually really awesome." So yeah,
And then it's such an old classic gag, but him jumping down, onto the horse, and the horse just moves forward. That horse is a dick. You're right.
I'm fully on the horse's side there because he was jumping from like a 2-story building. Like, when he's on that horse, he's gonna, hurt the horse. Like, the horse is like, nah, bro. You're gonna take that. You gotta learn to fall by yourself. And then, because he lets him get on later, but yeah, like that's a moment where it's like, if he's gonna jump off from a 2-story building directly onto a horse's back, one, that he's gonna, hurt himself in an area he might not want to hurt, and the horse might not do so well. So I think it's probably for the best that the horse is just like, nah, we'll do that way.
Yeah,
but no, I love the fact that, and I'm sure I noticed this on past viewings, but it's been a while since I saw the movie. But I love that that's a thread that continues throughout the whole movie. It's not like he and the horse get in sync at some point. No, that horse is still knocking him off and letting him fall on his ass even later in the movie.
Well, and like you said, Jared, it's more like the horse is like, "Look, man, I'm going to do my thing. If you can't figure out how to duck, like, you're just going to get knocked off." Like, I love the chase scene where all the soldiers are chasing the riderless horse. And that's so he's coming up from behind on them. Like, first of all, that the stunt work on the horses there is incredible. Like, I know we've mentioned like the fight scenes and stuff, but the stunt writing there is truly amazing. But I just love the old gag of him sort of taking him out one by one till at last the one guy finally looks back and is like, "Oh no, they're all gone," and like the horse lets him get on then, but the horse is like, "You gotta get your shit together, man."
I want to say something else. That character is like the very definition of like a great side character. Like, he has his own narrative peppered throughout the movie. Because he's there in the beginning when the brothers, catch them off guard, and I love when Alejandro's first stealing the horse, and there's just that moment where there's the really big guy, and he has him come down. He's like, "Kill him." And that poor guy gets his teeth, mashed in with the cannonballs, and
terrible.
And then they come spitting out like popcorn.
Yeah. I also sorry, you just said the kill him. I also wish we normalized a little more like people just using their own accent. Like, nobody's accent in this movie really makes sense, but that's okay. Just let people just talk in their own accent. Like, it's not a huge deal, So these days it's like, God, I was just thinking of when I was watching this, I was like, whatever, everybody speaks in their real accent, their real voice. Like, that's great, no problem. And I was thinking, God, we had one side character in House of the Dragon who had an accent and everybody lost their shit over it. And I was like, let's go back to this though. Like, this was way more fun than trying to nitpick who would have what accent. So yeah.
I love it when accents don't make any sense. Like, just one of my favorite examples is that there's a World War II movie called Valkyrie. It's the one with Tom Cruise. And I love the fact that they actually start off the movie with all the characters like speaking in German for like the first, 60 seconds of the movie or whatnot. And it's subtitled, and then the subtitles go away, and it's kind of that Hunt for Red October conceit where you start off with the authentic language and then it just melts away. But all the actors in that movie are British, except for the one German guy who's the actor who was in The Pianist, and he was in King Kong, and he's been in a lot. Who's always, the poor guy is almost always playing a Nazi. I feel really bad for him, but he's talking with a thick German accent, and all the other actors are British. And it's just like, but we don't care because we love those actors. And,
Right.
you know, and I don't want to hear them faking a British or a German accent.
Right.
Like, well, they're all British except for Tom Cruise. And he's just talking like Tom Cruise.
Well,
But
Anthony Hopkins just talking like Anthony Hopkins here. No attempt to like make any accent make sense, right? It's just like, nope, just talk. You're Anthony Hopkins. Just do it. So yeah.
And Catherine Zeta-Jones is very famously Welsh, not Spanish. So
so she is putting on an accent for that. But I'm so happy because, oh my God, you know, like she's hot enough, but with that accent.
It's perfect. The way I kind of approach it with this is like, we want the actors to give the performances that they're best suited. That's really the ultimate goal of the movie. So if the British actor and they're more comfortable playing as a British thespian, even if they're meant to be playing a Spanish Don, let them do it. And my brain kind of just internalized in the real life of the movie. These characters are probably all speaking Spanish, but because it's an American movie, we're hearing them speak in English, and I just go with that. It's like, as you say, John, it's kind of like the Valkyrie Hunt for Red October thing, where they kind of give us a glimpse that the character's natural language is probably wouldn't be this, but let's just go with the movie so we can let the actors actually give performances that they're more comfortable with.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I always go back to the Hunt for Red October because it's like nobody wants to hear Sean Connery sound anything other than Sean Connery. Like, yes. It's his voice. He's going to use that Scottish voice. Like, don't mess with it.
Well, yeah, it's also like I always wanted them to just let Benedict Cumberbatch talk in Benedict Cumberbatch's real voice for Doctor Strange. I was like, no, the American accent, it's Benedict Cumberbatch, like he has one of the most insanely beautiful voices on the planet. And it's not even that his American accent is necessarily bad. It's not great, but it's not necessarily bad. It's just more like, but his real voice though, so yeah.
Well, it's the thing, like, and sidebar for this, like, we like any of us who has like an intense like attraction to a British actor, like the accent is part of that. It just is. Like, and I think Kira does a great job with accents. I think she did a fantastic job also with In a Dangerous Method, having a Russian accent. I think she did a great job. But when she's allowed to speak in just her regular British accent, there's just a sweet spot there where I'm like, yes, things are as they should be.
Exactly.
People what they want, and I do think it actually serves the movie well that the lead Antonio Banderas is Spanish and he is speaking with his natural accent, so that kind of gives everyone else the permission to kind of fill in around him rather than us just thinking that this is going to be just a complete fantasy land. This movie is taking place in Spanish California, so we need at least a little bit of a degree of buy-in, but and all the supporting actors, like the background actors, they're all like speaking in their natural accents, but it's just, you gotta kind of allow a little bit for the magic of movies to come in, and again, put the actors' performances first. So. Well,
anybody ever doubts the right way to go on matters like this? It was the complete and total misfire of of Oliver Stone's Alexander, that because Colin Farrell speaks with, it has an Irish accent, let's make every other actor in this movie speak with an Irish accent.
And it's like on a slightly more serious note, it's important for representation too. Like there was the whole story about Diego Luna in Andor, and like how many people were like, you know, telling stories about like, oh, he sounds what I sound like, you know, like and stuff like that. So like it's important for representation as well to just let people talk how they talk, you know. Like I do understand that in certain cases it makes more sense to sort of sync up the accents and things like that. But in a movie like this, this isn't like realistic anyway. So just let people do what they're going to do here, you know? So yeah, that was a small thing that I really enjoyed about this movie, was that everyone just talked in their normal voice. So yeah.
Another, and here I'm going to go back to talking about Catherine Zeta-Jones again, but like I love her little bit after the end of the sword fight when Raphael comes in. She's like, Zorro was here. We fought him and he left. He left.
He was.
Did you recognize him? No. He was young and vigorous. He's very vigorous, Father. Vigorous. Yes.
He was vigorous. That's a word for it.
I love that they were actually rolling in the hay.
I mean, let's be honest. They basically the sword play was not a substitute.
This is actually not the Simpsons where with the poke of Zorro, but like there's an episode where it's some sort of movie and the two main characters dance, and at the end of the Tango de la Muerta, he's like, oh, we won, and now you're pregnant with my child. And she's like, how? And he's like, shh, it is the mystery of the dance. Like that's like, it's the mystery of the sword fight, you know. So she is now pregnant with my child. It is the mystery of the rolling in the hay sword fight. So yeah.
I'm just going to pop in this other random screenshot I get, which is totally not, it totally fits in the moment. I love how she just pops into frame at the end of this big fight scene.
Literally said boobs the second this happened. So that was.
I remember the audible reaction when I saw this in the theater as a kid. She just comes into frame and, oh, boobs. And and the whole audience started like mixture between murmur and laughter. And oh my God.
No,
God bless him.
That was like I said, the two of us, me and my straight partner watching this, and I'm the one that's like, boobs. Paul's like, yes, honey, those are boobs. That's great. So yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's like I don't know, there were just so many fun moments in this. One of them that was unexpectedly sweet, I thought, was when Diego tells Alejandro that he's going to teach him to be a gentleman. You know, he's like, you have to learn.
Yes.
And Alejandro goes, oh, a gentleman. Like, he's so, like, pleased by this idea. But then this is going to take a lot of work, you know? So, like,
yes.
I do wish we'd seen a little like I said, there's some places in the movie where I would have liked to have seen a little more just for fun's sake. You know what I mean? Obviously we can intuit that there was a long and arduous, you know, teaching scene in between there, but just because they were I feel like it would have been more funny moments if we had gotten to see more of that sort of thing, you know? So the training pretty short. That montage pretty short, you know, which is fine. Again, no, I'm not complaining. That one in particular, I think there could have been some opportunity for some pretty funny moments. So, and
this is the kind of thing where you have to show a lot of restraint as a filmmaker, because it would be very easy to just like, oh, this will be fun. Let's just throw in, you know, a couple minutes of this. But at a certain point, the movie needs to get going. And like for pacing reasons, it just needs to push forward. I will say, like, here we go again. More screen caps on the way. But there's another deleted scene that actually, it's early in the movie where it shows Elena, like, doing some kind of like horseback competition with like some of the soldiers, and Captain Love is part of it, and you know, she gets a lecturing to by Raphael because she's, you know, not conducting herself as a lady, but she's got this outstanding costume that is very Zorro-esque. And I'm like, you know, there should be an extended cut or something where this is at least thrown in, just, you know, because this costume, you know, if nothing else, deserves to be seen as part of the movie. I wouldn't say no to an extended cut of this film.
No.
It moves. It's a very brisk, I think it's like 2 hours and 17 minutes. Like, it just, there's never a scene where this movie feels like it's dragging its feet. That's kind of part of the pulp serial spirit. It's one action set piece or comedic piece of banter into another, and it's part of why it's so damn fun.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff they sort of don't bother explaining, which is, again, like you said, John, it's kind of for like, I don't know, did Diego just have money buried somewhere to finance all this stuff? Like, you know what I mean? It's like, you know, there's a lot of stuff they just don't ever explain, but it doesn't really matter, you know, like maybe they stole the clothes, maybe you know, who knows, you know, but they sacrifice like that kind of stuff for like you said, brisk pacing and like more fun, and for the movie to never feel like it's sort of idling or sort of, you know, they're stringing it out or anything like that. So, which again, I think is not necessarily all that common these days. I think they do feel like, because we've become increasingly sort of demanding as audiences for stuff like this, you know, like that, I think they have sort of increasingly become like, we have to explain all this stuff, you know, and it's like, sometimes you just don't, you know, that's okay.
I can just imagine like having to read the social media commentary about this movie after, well, yeah, how did Diego pay for all this? This movie is stupid.
I just figure he had a lot of gold buried in the waterfall cave. I'm like, that's good enough for me. So yeah.
I mean, I just go back to the you know, Family Guy Peter Griffin logic, where it's like, you know, he pulls off these miraculous stunts, and he's like, you know, there was one episode where he's like, you have no idea how much work this took. Oh, you think, oh, it's just another gag. Just Peter's able to pull this off without any resources or whatever. But no, what you're actually seeing here, you have no idea how much it costs, how much I had to plan.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and at some point we're just like, yeah. Like I said, at one point Paul was like, where do you get the money for this? I was like, yeah, I don't know. Paul's like, yeah, whatever. You know, so we just sort of moved on from it. There was no like sitting around being like, well, this takes me right out of it. You know, so yeah. And again, there are some movies where that stuff is more important than the. I'm not going to pretend like I've never criticized anything I liked for, you know, being inaccurate or needing, you know, because I definitely have. But in a movie like this, it's like, you just don't, it just doesn't matter, you know? So yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, and this is like one of my pet peeves. It's like the joy of like getting wrapped up in a good story is, yes, there's stuff you just don't question. It's just part of the story, and yeah, so
yeah.
But so I'll just like a couple more moments with Captain Love, which are really great that I wanted to mention. I mean, I hate the character. You know, he's an awful person, but like, you know, when he says, you know, curious, actually, it's the second time I've shot that man while he was flying through the air. Like, great writing, but you just want to smack the shit out of him.
Oh yeah.
And then, of course, then there's Montero's reaction to Jack, you know, after he's shot, because, you know, at one point, you know, he's hurling all these insults at them, and then after he's shot, and Montero just turns and goes, "Peckerwood?" And they're all just laughing amongst themselves because it's just, you know, big joke. They don't care. It's, you know, oh God. bunch of bastards.
That was such a sweet moment, though, when he realizes he knows Alejandro.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like that was a really good performance by that actor whose name I don't know. I'm sorry, but that was another really like unexpectedly sweet moment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no,
and it's a good thematic point as well, because that's kind of one of the first twists. We meet that character, Three-Fingered Jack, I believe his name is, when he has Alejandro and his brother Joaquin captive, and he's leading them for the bounty. Turns out the ruse, he's actually in league with them. But when then you think he dies in that early scene when Captain Claw shoots him, but then he comes back and he gets the great comedic moment. But he actually has the scene where he is kind of taking the Dons to task, where he's like, yes, I steal people's wallet and I steal people's money. You steal people's lives. And that kind of speaks to the fact that the Dons are embarking on this kind of selfish plan to, take California for themselves. But they don't and they're using effectively slave labor to do it. And they're trying to con Santa Anna by giving him gold that's dug from his own land. So they're clearly like the bigger thieves in this movie, even if this Three-Fingered Jack is not, ostensibly the kind of person who we would think of as a thief. But that kind of speaks to the whole idea of the movie's themes of class and ideas of, aristocrats being the ones who are trying to, ultimately take control of this land because they see it's theirs by right to exploit for profit. And Zorro is the one who speaks against that. And the fact that Zorro himself, the original Zorro was a man of privilege, but his successor is a man who's truly of the people, a commoner who was inspired by him. That's part of the movie's overall successful message in the end about why the character of Zorro is heroic, and why, as he says at the end, there will always be a Zorro, and when the time comes, he will ride again. Including in the sequel, which we haven't mentioned, which is not as good as this.
No.
It's funny because as much as I love this one, you'd think I would have at least watched the sequel all the way through, but I think I watched about the first 20 minutes of it, and then I was like, this isn't going well. I think I'll preserve the memory of the original one,
right,
and just stick with that. Which is a shame because it had the same director too. You would have thought that the magic would have been there, but it seems like they just went a different way with it. And but it's fine. This stands as a classic now, and it's we're used to it. Especially back in the day, the sequels that weren't as good, are, something that I think those of us who grew up on sequels kind of, back in the day are, we're used to that. I think quality sequels is, nowadays it's a bit more common to have a sequel that's good, but there was a time where, you just took for granted that, the sequel's not going to be as good.
Yeah.
But
the sequel was the kind of sequel that it's not like it undoes anything that was great about the first movie. It's just kind of unnecessary.
Yeah. But that's okay, because I have returned to this film more times than I can count, and it's always just such a pleasure. So it certainly hasn't ruined anything by having a subpar sequel.
It did age well, this film, to be perfectly honest. I was like,
yeah.
It was as much fun as when I first watched it. There's nothing that's like weird or offensive in it now. Again, it actually felt really nice coming back to this after the sort of turn that I think movies and TV have taken more recently, away from this. This has just been a lot nicer. So yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think I was a little bit worried. I was like, going into it, I was like, is some of the stuff with Elena, from a modern perspective, is it going to feel like sexist or anything like that? But far from it. I think it's because there's such this wonderful, mutual like attraction between her and Alejandro, that all the stuff just comes across as like really playful, and and just and she is such a strong character on her own. She's so strong-willed, and I think it all works beautifully. And what I really loved watching this was, and it's going to sound like this is me complaining about, getting older, but it's actually not. It's a positive thing. But watching this, I used to think, well, movies from like the 90s onward are never going to look aged in the way that, older films did when I was young, because the quality of film preservation and the actual quality of like film stock that they used was so, by that point had evolved so much that, it's not like when we were young and we'd watch a movie from like 30 years beforehand and you could tell they looked older. But what's changed now is that the film technology is with high definition video, the way they shoot. So newer films do have a different look to them from movies like this. And so what I just found really interesting was watching this and realizing that as clean and as beautiful as the film looked, it did also have this, this look and feel of being, a movie from, almost 30 years ago. And I realized how much I love that. There was just I guess you would call it a nostalgia for that, of just the way that, I don't think I'm surprising anybody to say that I'm a big like lover of actually shooting on film and the look that gives, and especially seeing all these actors who are nearly 30 years younger in this movie than they are today. It just made me feel real like, wow, this is looking back in time, at like it's capturing a moment that when I was in it was so like current and present, but now I have the advantage. And you could look at that as oh, woe is me, I'm getting older, or you could look at it as it's actually really cool to look back at a time that I remember really fresh, and then to look at it through this lens of of actually capturing that time on film, and how beautiful it still looks, and to see all these beautiful sets and the locations, and yes, the actors who look fantastic, and just to be able to step back in time a bit, and to still love and appreciate that, and so so every part of that just made me just smile so wide today.
No, well said to all of that. I know I will sometimes give you grief, John, when you get a little bit too like, oh my God, this movie is so old now, and I'm so old, and I don't want to get down on you, man. It's like, but the thing about it is that with movies like this, that where you can actually reflect on the passage of time, that kind of introspection is part of what is so great about revisiting them, because this is the type of movie that unfortunately doesn't get made very much anymore. And that makes it all the more special that it's still, as Erin says, holds up as well as it does, because it's the type of movie that frankly audiences used to love, and many of us still do. So if we can get back to that spirit of storytelling, that where it really is just more about the idea of an adventure with these kind of timeless characters that doesn't need to be a movie that makes $1 billion, but it does have like great actors and a big, big action scenes and sweeping romance, that's something to be valued. So I'm very glad that we were able to revisit this movie. And it's now 25 or 26 years old, depending on how you want to count it. And, as you guys said, it holds up. And I would always say that, with a movie like this, where when you come back and revisit it, it's nice when you're able to, your perspective changes and you're able to say, like, I saw this movie one way when I first saw it, and now I'm at a different place in my life and I see it differently. And then it's great to have movies where it's like, I saw it back when I was much younger and I'm seeing it now and I feel like very similarly, and it takes me back to that same spirit that I had back then. That's valuable too. So I feel like this movie is one of those movies, at least for me, where it's like, this movie is still just as fun as it was when I first saw it. And it's okay if it's not like, oh, I now see that there was a hidden layer of thematic depth that I missed on the first, like, I that's there if you want it, but it also is just a rip-roaring adventure. And it's the kind of movie that, should never be put down as like a guilty pleasure by snooty.
Oh no.
Because no one should feel guilty about loving this movie. This movie rocks.
Yeah, I think, like, if I had to pick out something that I see a bit more clearly about the movie than I did when I was little, it probably would be its, what it says about, class and, and the way the rich look down on the poor, and, that's something that maybe wouldn't have been as, affecting to me as a kid because I wasn't really thinking about that stuff. But aside from that, I think I very much feel the same things watching this now that I felt when I saw it when I was a kid. That soaring sense of adventure and the playfulness between the characters and yeah, the music and the and just the fun, the fight scenes, the swashbuckling nature of the whole thing. I think by and large, I think you're right, Jared. This is one of those movies that I'm just like, it's hitting all those same notes for me as an adult as it did when I was a teenager. So, and I'm perfectly fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fact that all those things work just as well for me now, like, is a testament to the movie, and I love that, and it's a reminder of just why I love these types of movies. We mentioned also the other movies of this era, like The Mummy and especially that first Pirates of the Caribbean. It's just, there's an element of that kind of fun adventure, summer, popcorn movie that I still find really appealing. And
Yeah, and along those lines, I actually, just because we haven't mentioned his name enough, I think the director of this movie, Martin Campbell, he's not like a big director, he's not like we've talked about Nolan and Scorsese. Like, Martin Campbell is not the kind of person who's going to invoke that kind of reverence, but one of the things he's very good at is doing these kinds of serialized adventure kind of stories, because in addition to this movie, he had previously directed Goldeneye, and then he would go on to direct Casino Royale in 2006. So that kind of, James Bond is very much in that same spirit of, kind of adventure and action set pieces, and romances with sexy but dangerous femme fatales. And so it's Like that's the kind of movie making that is also worth celebrating. And
well, and it's interesting because I would say that if you look at GoldenEye and Casino Royale, those are two very different kinds of Bond movies.
oh yeah,
And actually, I would even say I see more similarities between this and Casino Royale than I see between the two, Bond movies themselves. But I love that he has such, his movies have such a sense of variety about them. They're very different kinds of movies. And I do remember, I had talked about the trailers earlier. I do remember seeing, like, in the trailer it said, from Columbia TriStar Pictures and the director of GoldenEye. That's a weird way to market a Zorro movie, but
the humor is kind of the same too, though. Like, now that I didn't know this, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, the sort of funny things about GoldenEye, I think, are like kind of similar to the things that are funny about this movie as well. Like,
okay.
Obviously, again, like sort of tonally quite different so far as movies go, but still, like that's interesting now that you mentioned that. So
yeah, no, all these movies are kind of their time. GoldenEye is very much a 90s movie. This movie is very much a late 90s movie. And Casino Royale, which I will just go ahead and say is my favorite Bond movie. That's very much in the mid 2000s era. It does have a little bit of a harder, darker edge to it. It kind of does feel a bit more like the Bat storytelling that was coming out. Oh, yes, and of course, we can't mention GoldenEye without mentioning the N64 game, which, interestingly, being that I was a PlayStation kid, I never owned the GoldenEye game, but I lost to my friends at it many, 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 many times.
that is also my experience with it, Jared. I'm horrible at that game, absolutely horrible. My brother had it, Paul has it now, and he's like, let's play GoldenEye. I'm like, no, I am traumatized from how horribly I lost at that game all the time. So.
Well, here's the thing. Like, whenever I played multiplayer on the game, my best friend at the time, Tim, and I would play it. And sometimes we'd play it with his little brother, sometimes with one of his other friends. And they were always setting those damn remote mines for when I would come through certain areas and they'd blow me up. So I wasn't super great at multiplayer, but the actual, like, game itself, like the solo player experience, like that I was good at. I do want to say, like, I am often caught between, I think Casino Royale is my favorite, definitely my favorite Daniel Craig Bond movie, but I do think GoldenEye is my favorite Bond movie. Not so much that it is aged as gracefully as as Casino Royale. It is very much a mid-90s movie, but it's still my favorite because it was my first Bond movie, and I liked so many of the things that are very specific to that movie. The score is unlike any other James Bond score. It's funny because it's much more like techno and digital than the other Bond scores. So at first glance, you'd say, I wouldn't think you'd like it that much, John, but it's just so different from so much else. And I think because it was my first Bond movie, that it really captured my imagination. And of course, then you got Famke Janssen.
The woman who kills people with their thighs is pretty so, yeah.
Yeah, you want to talk about another formative experience. It was so funny because I watched that movie with my parents, but they actually fell asleep during the movie while we were watching in the living room. And I was one who was like, that was my first Bond movie. So I was like, oh, James Bond, that's that old thing, right? I don't want to watch this. And they actually fell asleep during it. I was on the floor like this, watching the movie, so entranced. And then, the pool shower room scene came on with her and Bond. And I was like, they still asleep? Just making sure.
Right.
So yeah.
Now a little extreme, FYI, for everybody, but yeah. So
yeah, no, love that movie. Love the video game. I actually do want to talk about that film at some point on the channel as well. But yeah. So anyway, making our way to finish out our Mask of Zorro conversation. I'll just finish off by saying again, you know, this is just one of the best, like, fun escapist, you know, swashbuckling adventure movies that there's ever been. And I don't have a single negative thing to say about it. Honestly, it's so wonderful. And because I've got to show off the rest of the physical media that I had sitting here, I did watch this today on the 4K Blu-ray.
Nice.
It looked amazing. Like, those screen caps that I was putting up, they don't look anywhere near as good as what I watched today.
Nice.
So I recommend that for anybody who has the equipment for it. And then I showed off the original soundtrack earlier, but this is the limited expanded soundtrack that just came out a couple months ago. And it's great because I was very happy about this because this actually has the music for the dance scene, which I was always a bit peeved that the original soundtrack left that off. So.
Yeah.
But and I actually, as a way to work in another shot of Catherine Zeta-Jones, this actually is a screenshot from the 4K version. And I think you can just see that, like, the colors and the detail and, you know, everything just looks incredible. And this is just a screenshot, you know, a standard quality screenshot. She looks even more amazing in actual 4K, if that was possible.
Oh, it's possible.
But okay, so that's it for me. You guys got any final comments?
I'll say, because we'll let Erin have the last word. I'm just going to say that this movie was a joy to revisit, both as just a classic adventure and as kind of a time capsule of the era. And I do want to, just because we talked rightly and deservedly so much about how lovely and amazing Catherine Zeta-Jones is, and oh, is she? I do want to just give one more shout out to the star of the movie, the lead, Antonio Banderas, because this really was the movie that made him into a household name, and he is great in it as just a classic archetypical swashbuckling hero who's charming and fun, and it's a great performance that sometimes, you know, you have leading men in these movies who can be a little bit, you know, stiff. And in this case, he is the opposite of that. He flows. And when he flows with Catherine Zeta-Jones, magic happens. So that's all I'm going to say about that. It's a great, you know, fun, you know, romantic, exciting movie, and was well worth revisiting it then and hopefully in the future.
Yeah, definitely. He's also joins the sort of leading man category that's, I think, quite narrow, of super hot guys who are put in very serious roles who actually have truly excellent comedic timing and chops as well, like John Hamm or somebody, you know, where this guy who you see in all these really serious roles, and then you see him in something like this and you're like, oh, he's actually really funny too, you know, has a really, really good comedic timing as well. So yeah, I echo everything you said, and I'm also just and also really, really funny. So yeah, but no, I don't have anything else to say other than what you guys have already said. I had the best time with this, and I'm really glad. I was really glad when I saw it on your list of movies you wanted to discuss, John, because I feel like it doesn't always get the love that it deserves. So
yeah, I'll just echo what you were saying, Jared, about Antonio Banderas. It's so funny to go back and watch this now and be like, man, this is really when he broke through big time, and it's just like he makes it all look so effortless. You know, he's just having the time of his life in this movie, and you know, you just take it for granted. Whenever I think of Antonio Banderas, I'm like, oh, Zorro. You know, it just he and the role were just such a perfect fit, and it's just funny to think back to a time before that. It's like before this, it was like, oh yeah, he was in Desperado and probably a couple other things. And by the way, he's amazing in Desperado. That movie is great. We could also do a stream about that because I have like a million things to say just about the opening scene of that movie with Steve Buscemi narrating the story of him coming into the bar and just wrecking havoc. But no, he's just such an amazing actor, and he did such a great job in this. And also, you know, we did talk about him, but I feel like we probably didn't heap enough praise upon Anthony Hopkins just because he is just so amazing in this. And you're not wrong, Erin, earlier when you said, yeah, he's playing the older mentor, but he's got it going on in this movie too. You know, he's very he's very stylish, and you know, he's a badass, and you know, and yeah, it's just, I feel like everybody was on top of their game in this movie. And also I've mentioned the score many times throughout this, but I just want to throw his name out there one more time. James Horner, who, even though Lord of the Rings stands as my favorite score of all time, I think you and I might agree on that, Erin.
Maybe so.
James Horner was always my favorite composer overall, just because his music was always so emotional, which was kind of for me what, even though I've always revered John Williams and he has made some of the greatest scores of all time, there was always something about James Horner though, where his music had an emotionality to them that always, before I even knew what film scores actually were, I was touched by his music. And that goes all the way back to The Land Before Time, which I saw when I was about 4 years old. I didn't pay attention to the music, you know, like I do now at that time, but it had an effect on me. I do know that. And the fact that he died a number of years ago, it's probably like 10 years ago at this point. I just remember I bawled my eyes out when he died, and so I just really want to, you know, just make a point to really praise him and his music. Not to end all this on a sad note, but I still cherish all of his scores. And so when I watch this movie and hear his music, it just makes me really happy. And so, yeah, if you guys, you know, haven't like taken a listen to the score on its own, it's gorgeous. And yeah, and there I go. I'll finish right there. Fantastic movie, and I had so much fun today talking with you guys about this. So thank you to both of you.
I was gonna say, for more score talk, come back in 2 weeks for Rings of Power, because there's gonna be a lot of that there. So yeah.
Oh my god.
We'll get time for that. Yeah, great guys. I just want to say briefly, I apologize for the quality of my video. As I said, we did lose power here in the Bay Area, and it hasn't come back on. So that's why I'm sitting here in the dark. And probably for the best that we turn out the lights on this screen, or I get total blackness when the sun fully sets. But I'm glad I was able to make it to the end with you, because I really was looking forward to talking about the movie. But enjoyed to do it, especially with Erin. So great to have you on.
It's great to be here.
We got no proof that you're actually still here. You could be just, you know, it could be somebody impersonating you, Jared.
I keep thinking he needs to have the voice modulator, because he looks like the people that they have talk in documentaries when they want to hide their identities. You know, like it's like you can only see his outline. He just needs the voice modulator. So yeah.
Yeah, we would love to have you, AK. So yeah, thank you. And thank you for everybody who stayed throughout. Love you guys. And yeah, if you liked the stream, maybe not that I'm begging after the view count last week, but if you'd like to share the stream on your social media accounts, that would be much appreciated. And also, if you're watching this and you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please do so. And yeah, and we've got a lot of fun stuff coming out over the next couple weeks. Next week, Jared and I will be doing a retrospective of the first 2 seasons of Star Wars: The Bad Batch. That'll be on Saturday instead of Sunday because the Super Bowl is on Sunday. And then the week after that, we'll be back to Sundays. We'll be talking The Rings of Power with Erin and Cecilia. And then the week after that, Season 3 of The Bad Batch. We'll be talking about the premiere. And then after that, we will have Laura and Trish on to talk about The Witch, which I just saw for the first time. I guess it was a few months ago. I don't know. Time is a concept. But I absolutely love the movie, so I'm looking forward to talking about that. And that's it for now. We'll plan for more stuff as we get closer to that, but I think we're covered for a good couple weeks. This is the one with Anya Taylor-Joy.
It came out in 20. It was directed by Robert Eggers, and it's great. Very scary though, so make sure you watch it in a dark room like this one all by yourself.
And I will just say, that movie really freaked me out. There's some stuff in there which is just not and not comforting, shall we say. But it's going to be a great discussion, so I'm looking forward to it. All right. Thank you, everybody. And I just love you guys so much. So thank you again, Erin and Jared, for joining in on this conversation, and thank you for everybody for tuning in. We love you guys, and I'm just looking for a way to wrap up. I don't know, I'm rambling, but we'll see you next week. Have a good night.